Welcome to TimesTechies Talks. This is the second discussion in a series called AI That's Built to Deliver that we are having in partnership with Publicis Sapient, the digital business transformation company. For years, enterprise technology followed a predictable model. Organizations bought large platforms, those ERP, CRM kind of solutions, adapted their processes to fit them, and relied on integrators to make everything work together. This delivered scale, but often at the cost of flexibility and differentiation. AI is beginning to change that. It is reshaping how enterprise systems are built and connected. With AI, organizations can now create purpose-specific capabilities, adapt workflows more dynamically, and integrate systems with far less effort than before. In other words, enterprise technology can move from standardization back to, once again, differentiation. But this also raises important questions. If AI becomes central to operations, where is value really created? In the model or in how it is applied? Do enterprises still need large monolithic platforms or more flexible modular layers? And as AI becomes more embedded in decision making, how do organizations maintain control over data, governance, and outcomes? To discuss these issues, we have with us four seasoned professionals. We have Sheenam Ori. Sheenam is Managing Director at Broadridge Financial Solutions India. Welcome, Sheenam. We have Anjan Mazumdar. Anjan is Engineering Director for Catalog, Merchandising and Marketplace at Tesco, the British multinational retailer and the UK's largest supermarket chain. Welcome, Anjan. We have Rakesh Ravuri. Rakesh is SVP of Engineering and CTO at Publicis Sapient and also heads AI product development. So welcome, Rakesh. And we have Narasimhan Raghavan. Narasimhan is Group Vice President of Technology at Publicis Sapient. Welcome, Narasimhan. As a topic that I mentioned, let me start off by asking you, and maybe Rakesh, you can set the context. Are traditional enterprise platforms, the likes of ERP, CRM, etc., becoming a constraint rather than an enabler in today's AI-first world?
I think they are reaching their point of utility. They have taken the world to a digitization era from manual work, paperwork into a digital transactional system. But right now, the world is moving into the decisioning system and expert systems, right? Which we all talked as a theoretical construct in 80s. What enterprises require right now is not just a transactional system which captures the business rules, but they need a system which can act like human, right? And take some of the cognitive load which is repetitive. Earlier, most of these enterprise systems, as you called it, they are rules-based systems. The companies had control. It is repeatable in terms of the rules. But now that repeatability is now becoming a constraint, which was an advantage earlier. Now with the AI and innovation, you want your businesses to actually adapt, not just repeat what it has been doing, right? So in order to do adaptation, you need certain form of intelligence to understand, saying that these were my constraints, this is my current environment, so that is how I can adapt. To do that, right now, people are going into an agentic transformation. This is the next step of digital transformation. And when you do the agentic transformation, companies have learned what works and what doesn't work, what were the constraints posed by the previous digital systems. Now they're looking in the new era, they don't want to repeat them.
Repeat, can you give an example of?
Like we all must have seen frustrations about with the customer service, right? When something happens, a rules-based system will say, okay, this order I flag it as suspicious, so you need to talk to an agent. Or you want to change your ticket, they'll say that according to the rules, you can't change the ticket because you have booked it in a certain class. Then you call a customer service. When a human talks to you, they understand your problem and say, yes, let me see what I can do for you. And then it gets changed, right? That is how businesses operate, right? Now you can encode that logic which a customer service rep is doing, or with your business manager is making the decisions. That if can be captured and replicated with AI, which AI is now capable of doing that, because it can see the past history of saying that, oh, when these conditions arrive, even though these rules have not been met, there are other implications of this and I can do that. In order to encode this into a software system, it is highly complex because this is a behavioral data which evolves over a period, right? And capturing the behavioral data is the next big thing, right? It is not about data anymore. Like we have built systems to capture data. When you heard statements like data is the next oil and all those things, right? Right now, that data was used to train the models. The next big thing is your agents require behavioral data in order to make decisions, not just data. They have the data, they have been trained on data. And the companies which capture the behavioral data and they are able to align the agents to evolve and understand their organizational process and be constantly learning are the ones who are going to thrive.
Okay, okay. Shinam, same thing.
So, I have a slightly contrarian view to what our friend said here. For us, right, we are an organization that enables better financial lives. And in that, if I take the business of communication, we process over 10 billion communications in a year. That's a massive amount of communications. Without the core engine that allows you to process that kind of volumes, we will not be anywhere. Right? The new age systems will not be able to manage that kind of transactions. It's very important that our core system is reliable. So for us, core system is really something that's necessary. But yes, we recognize that the world is changing from just delivering standardized applications and standardized communications. So we built something called distribution GPT very recently. Now, what does distribution GPT do for our customers? So distribution GPT allows the core to be personalized and available in a manner that is easily consumable by our clients and by their clients. So to me, in short, if I have to summarize, core infrastructure, core systems are necessary. They are here to stay. For us, definitely mainframes are here to stay for a really long time. But to enable better business experiences and better client experiences, we need to have an AI platform.
Akash, you want to respond to that? I mean, those core systems will still remain relevant.
No, of course, world is running on those core systems, right? But I'm talking about the constraints they are posing in terms of the evolution or the behavior which you want to create. You can't take the existing core systems. Yes, you can build the periphery. That is the stepping stone for you to make the experience right. But I feel AI is essentially changing the heart of your business process logic, which is what used to be the constraint of the big system. AI is right now not there in a way of reliability and consistency, but it is getting there fast. And when it gets there, what I feel is you need to engineer it right from the heart. You can't do it on the periphery. So the best example I'll give you is internet, right? For internet, people had to build in cloud native solutions. You couldn't take a desktop solution and say that I have an internet layer on top of it, right? The same thing will happen with AI. AI has to come from all the whole stack.
Architect has to change. Anjan?
Yeah, so I completely agree with both of you. It's slightly nuanced response that these traditional platforms are not inherently a problem. They get constrained when we put them in a workflow of faster decision, rapid decision, as you mentioned, and scale it. Let me describe that a bit, right? I mean, these traditional platforms, all of us have seen, we have grown with them for the last 20, 30 years. And they are underpinning a specific type of problem where the processes are very much defined. We spoke about ERP, CRM, but they underpin that process, we optimize it. We spoke about deterministic rules. And over a period of time, these rules are become so deep into the workflow. To get those rules out in the UX is becoming very difficult, and to scale it. Now with AI first, that gap is now becoming prevalent, where AI says that you need to make faster decisions, do simulation, scale it, ability to measure the outcome quite quickly, do the trade-offs, surface the intelligence. Now imagine the world where you need to bake that intelligence into a traditional platform. It will be so difficult to use the tools to bake that software in, and B, it will start to impact your enterprise because those are the systems that is taking your core value, driving the business value today. So that is now, I feel, creating that architectural gap, maybe architectural debt, you may sort of call out, right? I'm not saying we need to rip off, as both mentioned, that we need to rip off those traditional platforms. Not about that, but the core platforms gives us the competitive business edge over a period of time. They have become master of the domain data. They have mastered those attributes, they have mastered those transactions, and they have the core business value in terms of the data. What we need is an intelligence layer around that, which can go in parallel, take the data, drive at the context, surface the intelligence at the right time. And that is where I think it's sort of a bimodal thinking around.
Okay. Narasimhan's same thing, but also tell us, as Anjan was saying, these things have to be baked in. Are the big platforms also changing in a way that you can bake in some of these things inside?
Yeah, I think, see, in a way, it is all about the pace of change, right? So, how fast are you going to react as a business to your customers' needs really governs all of what they said, right? Because if I have to get hyper personalized, I need to have something in place to leverage AI to get it to the customer in a personalized way, right? So, think about invitations, products, messaging, packaging, all of it, right? Now, if you look at the core systems, as Shinam and Anjan talked about, they are evolving at a pace which may or may not be in sync with the pace you want to evolve for your customers. And sometimes you are in a P2B kind of situation, right? So, where you have customers of customers. So, in those cases, I see this as an evolution, right? So, what Rakesh talked about is where we will eventually go. So, think about it like a top of the maturity curve where you start to have a cross section and redo the heart of the system. But then the current reality is AI needs data for its decision making, right? Now the question is, how can we construct this data? I'm sure all of you heard of the word context, right? So how do you build this context from existing core systems is going to be sort of a near term focus, is what I think. And then how these core platforms facilitate the feeding of that context is going to be very key, right? So that's an evolution that I look at when it comes to core systems. Now you can build these as an evolutionary architecture. Eventually you can replace your core system, but those are functions of many different things like budgets and your other constraints as an organization.
So it's possible, you're saying, to over a period of time just build the entire capability rather than having to buy these platforms.
Yeah, I think it will coexist in the interim, but eventually businesses will have to sort of think about build those core capabilities, right? But that is going to take some time.
Yeah, Rakesh, same thing. I mean, what ultimately, where do you see this heading? Will you still have to buy those platforms, or
As with anything, nothing is black and white, right? There is a period of evolution, and as Narsimhan rightly put, I am trying to see where it went, right? Like internet, like if you see truly to build internet scale systems, it took us 20-25 years, right? In order to move from those systems to this. So AI will have its own period, but I feel it will be faster. Like for example, Tesco was the first and the only company which did successfully online grocery. And online grocery was a very unique differentiation for them because it is not selling marketplace products. It is like when you, I remember when I was the architect, um, the problem I need to solve was when you select a grocery item, there is no number of items. It's like the number of kgs of onions you want. And there is something called free weight. That means like you buy a chicken, whole chicken or a turkey, the weight changes depending upon what the farmer supplied you. You need a different system to handle that, and that is your differentiation. People now want your system to be intuitive. They want your system to understand my needs. That is what is the world is going into. That is what the behavioral data I'm talking about. And how a company uses this now, that differentiates one company from the other company, because everyone will have standard data sets, everyone will have access to it. Now it has become easier to integrate, right, the vast amount of data, right? But we also need to prepare ourselves for the fact that very clearly ask us what is our differentiation.
since Rakesh mentioned a lot of retail examples, tell me, I mean, like you did initially, is try to differentiate from Amazon early on. Are you doing something similar now with AI?
Yes, so my friend Rakesh touched upon a very important point around commoditizing models. So if we fast forward ourselves, say 2, 3, 4 years down the line, most of the models would be commoditized. Most of this intelligence won't be scarce. So I just wanted to add one thing is the capabilities, the platforms will stay, the ERPs, the CRMs of the world. because they have got a specific use case, and companies, enterprises needs to be very deliberate in their choice where to build, what to rent, what to buy. I think the capabilities in terms of price differentiation, arriving at your price index for your demography of a consumer, that is your moat. Yeah, arriving a differential range for your consumers, that is your moat. Yeah. Now, how you do it, you can orchestrate within various models that you can get it, you can build it. The real capability is those domain intelligence that you want to apply, and the capability here, for example, is the orchestration layer, the agentic experience layer, where I think Narasimhan, you spoke about context. How you can get context across boundaries, get your objective. If your objective is, hey, how can I increase my margin from X to Y? Yeah, very broad question. Yeah, but that then needs to translate it into those intelligence layers, those models, and those core platforms where you can get the plethora of domain data and get you a trade-off answer. And that is a capability I think enterprises need to sort of invest on, while these core platforms will stay.
And you're doing it within your inside the company itself, with taking partners as well.
Yes. So, for example, look at catalog, and that is our moat. Yeah. And how can you get a differential catalog for your consumers? Your domain data is going to help, but the domain intelligence that you sort of intelligence layer that you're going to create, that is your probabilistic rules, your data, your moat. How fast you can learn from that, how quickly you can do an A/B testing. That is a slightly different nuance. That is where we are investing as well.
Okay. Shinam, you said you're not going to give up your mainframes anytime. So tell me, but yet that personalization, etc., is becoming important. So how are you building those internally? Is important. It's all your data and all of that, right?
Yeah. See, my sense is that you have to buy certain capabilities. If you start to build a lot of them yourself, then it's going to take you a long time. So certain things you have to buy. I think your core infrastructure that is
So
needed.
what would you buy?
You would possibly buy services. You would buy, things from an AI vendor. You would buy a workday system. Those are the kind of things that you will buy. Now you have a core system. You've got data in that core system. That data needs to be converted into capabilities and then into experiences. The leading factor of converting your data and your business processes into those experiences is how do you manipulate and build and change business processes to evolve from just being hardcore core systems and humans to hardcore core systems, humans, and AI agents, right? If you now start to say, I want to have the same business process that I had earlier, but now I add an agentic AI layer into that, it's not going to work. You have to change the way you orchestrate your business process. You have to change the way people experience to really be working with the new technology. And that to me is going to be the differentiating layer. So you buy certain things, but the experiences, the outcomes, and the processes you build yourself.
Okay. Tell me, is AI making the whole integration process easier?
Definitely, yes. See, one of the biggest problem used to be in integration was how do you handle edge cases and nuances, and how do you handle when a system changes, right? And as Narsimhan was talking about, the pace of change has increased definitely all across, right? The same thing which used to take 5 years before, people are doing it in a year or even lesser, right? So that is an accepted fact that we are able to develop software a lot faster. Now, if you're developing software a lot faster, evaluation is happening a lot faster. If something else is orchestrating that, and earlier we used to have RPA systems, we used to have automation systems, which used to integrate different things in order to orchestrate. Now, if the system changes, it breaks everything, because earlier orchestrations were very hard coupled. I would say, right? Like if your interface changes or if you introduce a new feature that is not available in the orchestration because at the time you build the orchestration, you didn't know about it, right? So now you extrapolate the problem. If the systems are changing fast enough, there'll be more changes. So more brittle your automation becomes if you're traditional ways. This is where I think AI helps a lot. We always had this holy grail of service-oriented architecture. They always had this protocol of discoverability, right? Like you discover your interfaces and how can you dynamically invoke your interfaces used to be the holy grail of integration. Multiple standards have come in trying to address that and make it seamless. They all failed. Then people fell back on the simple REST interface, which basically scaled. With AI, these models are able to very intuitively understand, saying, oh, you wanted to post an order to this system, right? That is the intent. They go from intent rather than the contract. So AI is able to do that. That is how we are able to now, when we talk about agentic orchestration, that is what an agent is doing. No human is trying to write a logic saying that pick our attribute A, B, C and tell it to that. He's saying that I want you to take this data, move it to this system when this event happens. And an agent is able to determine, saying that, okay, let me understand your input format, let me understand your output format, and let me come up with how I can sort of take this and give it to that. But if you are able to revisit your process and say that for the exception conditions, I'll put the human in the loop, then the systems are actually very scalable because
How much faster are they?
they're very fast.
How much? Dramatically faster?
See, how much faster is case by case, but
Okay.
dramatically faster is the answer.
Okay.
For simple integrations, it has become trivial.
Shinam, you want to add to that?
So, from a Broadridge perspective, we have a highly regulated system. You're talking about an integration of data flowing through a lot of systems, a lot of layers, right from the front office all the way to the back office. It's not just you have to complete a trade. You have to do it properly, you have to do all the communications. Now, that integration to me is really complex and needs a complex integration layer. Now, if you add an AI integration to that, I think the enterprise architecture has to evolve. You had a kind of architecture which allowed the core systems to exist, but if you now need personalization on top, you need the data flow to go through and to track that data flow. You need to ensure that you have an SRE built on that. You need to ensure that you have AI engines tracking how all of that is doing and then deliver those personalized information. The entire architecture of that system needs to evolve. It is going to become far more complex. Okay, while AI makes things simple, simplicity comes at the cost of very complex architecture, in my opinion.
Anjan?
Yeah, I just wanted to add few things. I think Shinam and Rakesh spoke about traditional integration. We have lived that world, right? The traditional integration is about very simple terms. Lifting it up is connecting two systems. I've got an order. How can I pass it to the other systems? I've got this basket. Now tell me how can I fulfill that? It's very deterministic integration, order status, passing order status, etc. With AI, this particular pattern is changing because now I think Narasimhan mentioned about context. So instead of data, context is moving. Yeah. So let me give an example to say that, okay, if I have an objective, I ask the model to give me the response to that with certain constraints, certain validation, certain business case. All of that is a context. Yeah. And if you go deep, then what decisions AI need to make? How do we govern those decisions? Who makes those decisions? On what context the decision was made? So that's a whole. How do you prevent hallucinations? More data, more hallucinations coming in. How do you get trust at speed, basically, right? So all those needs to be driven through the platform equation as well. To your wonderful sort of response there, and I think with context, if you start to scratch the surface there, all of these comes at new architectural principles. You're building your experience layer. What sort of an orchestration engine you need to build in? How your models needs to talk to each other and surface that intelligence at the appropriate time in your UX. That's a nuance, and that's
In my vantage point, I have the luxury of working with many different clients, right? So one of the things that so in the integration space, if you look at it, AI makes it a little bit more natural, right? So for systems to integrate, it's more now dependent on taking the same order example, right? So I have an e-commerce order, I just need to pass it on to my supply chain for fulfillment, right? So it's become natural rather than focusing on a bunch of I need to send this attribute versus that information and things like that. Now, to enable that, how do you enable that? Now, there are two different systems, right? There is a system that is taking the order from the customer, and then there is a system that is going to fulfill your order. Now, both of these systems need to evolve their AI capabilities, right? That is where I kind of agree with Shinam, right? So, in terms of the central core architecture function is very important. I think they can establish a set of ground rules, right? So, in terms of how do systems have to communicate, how will I, in fact, discover different services or different capabilities in this case, and how do I eventually make this whole business process a reality, right? And in a consistent way. Now, if you do your own thing in different systems, you will land up in the same problem of complexity. But if you have to do it consistently, I think an enterprise architecture function is required, and that much more relevant in this case to be able to explore those capabilities, introduce a lot of consistency, and then eventually make it a reality, right? Help teams and systems make it a reality.
What do companies tend to do? They try to do it themselves, or I guess they need companies like yours to help them out, is it?
Yeah, so I think enterprise architecture in the classical world, I think, has sometimes been reduced to I'll choose this framework over that, right? But now I think it is more into governance, for example, right? So like the hallucination that Shinam talked about is not an easy problem to solve, right? Because hallucinations can manifest at any point in time. And then the other aspect I wanted to highlight on is why is your AI system making certain decisions, right? To trace that particular thing, explainability, right, is in itself a capability that architecture teams can introduce, right? So how can systems explain their decisions? So that is a huge area actually that needs to be put in place even before we start thinking about like making systems intelligent. So those will become the function.
Yeah, hence my point that you need to re-engineer from the, if you really want to take advantage of this, that this paradigm shift requires an architectural change from the heart of the enterprises, right? And the constraint should not force you to adopt a solution. Your solution should not be constrained, but we know the real fact. We obviously start with constrained solutions because we can't change everything overnight. But we also think about where we are heading. We need to have a North Star. The North Star requires us to rethink the business process. And if you're rethinking the business process, we should also rethink the systems which support those processes right from the heart of it.
You're saying this will apply even to a case like Sheenam's, where those core systems are absolutely valuable to her.
Yeah, no. They are valuable. They will be valuable, but the pace of the evolution matters. Your business will evolve at the pace at which your core systems evolve, right? So now you need to think about how fast you want your core to evolve. Yeah.
Exactly. Moving on, where does the real value come from? From these models or the application layer? Where do you see that, Sheenam?
So to me, the application layer provides the domain, the models provide a way of working. But going back to what I said earlier, I think the real value comes from your business process orchestration. So how do you convert your data and your domain knowledge and what you want to deliver into real insights and experiences for your customers? The building of that business layer, building of that experience layer, defining and orchestrating that experience is what is going to differentiate you from the next person, right? So if I'm providing something to a bank, okay, I have to give them a way to orchestrate their own experiences that make them unique from each other. So how do I architect that into my system that allows them business process orchestration, that allows them to personalize what they want to do and therefore deliver different and unique experiences to their clients. That's what I need to build. So to me, the value is not in the core thing, the value is not in the model alone. The value is in the entire orchestration. How do you build that capability? That capability is going to change the way you get perceived and who buys you.
And the models themselves, which are the ones you tend to use?
See, the models itself, there are different models for different things, right? And over time, these models are going to become commodities, right? They are expensive today, okay? The price of usage is going to change. To me, the model is a way of getting things done. Okay, what do you want to get done? Your business acumen, your thought leadership around that is going to change how you get perceived. In the age and era of AI, it is going to be that soft skill, that product management skill, that ability to design and craft an experience that is going to be the differentiator.
Yeah, sort of agree to that. I mean, the internet is getting excited about models every day. So every day there's talks about small model, large model, medium models, composite models. Uh, Models are there for a reason. Absolutely, they drive an intelligence and a value. Uh, Tomorrow I'll be using the same model as you, as my competitors, right? So where is the moat? Where is the moat? How do you want to use that model to your business case? For example, content generation and generative AI capabilities, right? It's a commodity software now. Yeah. Earlier it was scarce, now it has become a commodity software. Now, how can you use that commodity software in the model for your business case? That is your moat, because that compounds your business value. So we need to look at how we could use that model value and then use in the application layer. Yeah, build your capability in the application layer to drive and compound the business value. Uh, it will be a decision led, not a platform led or not a model led, but it's a decision led, driven by your application layer. Models are intelligence, application layers is a force multiplier and giving you that sort of a compounding your business value is what I think.
Yeah, I agree with 100% with everyone, right? The only additional thing I'll add is the models are also evolving differently across different industry spaces, right? So if you look at healthcare, for example, the drug discovery is a place where you might, like, businesses might appreciate like small models or very niche fine-tuned models that they want for themselves, right? Because if you look at drug discovery, that is core of their business. So I think it will evolve in its own pace. There will be organizations that will adopt the notion of fine-tuned or very specific local models to protect their IP. The other side of it is the collective intelligence, right? So that is what I call, in terms of coming together as a team and understanding what is that business process. That is in different minds today, right? So if you go and talk to a marketing department, they are dealing with different aspects of how to reach customers, right? So on one side there is customer data, on the other side there is what do customers react to well versus not, right? So if you look at that collective intelligence, that is what we will need to focus on to translate into a process. Now if you do that successfully, then you have enabled your AI layer successfully, right? And that happens at the orchestration and the application layers. The model is still going to provide you with the basic intelligence, and model, you can purpose models based on how you deem necessary.
Yeah, Nandan Nilekani also say this models are going to get commoditized. India should focus on applications. Yeah, I have one last question. Some of you touched upon it, hallucinations and all of that. And in this Sheenam's company, I'm sure it's particularly important. This control, control over data, your deployment, your decision making. Those must be really important.
Absolutely.
When you're
We are a highly regulated industry.
AI coming in, all of these things have become particularly important, I guess.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
How are you dealing with all of that?
So, from an industry perspective, one of the things that we are doing is we are having very controlled use cases around AI, right? And we're figuring out where is it that we want to deploy AI, where is it that we don't want to deploy AI. Your core engine cannot be affected, there cannot be hallucinations in that. But yes, there are things that AI can help us become better, right? I'll give you a very simple example. Now, a trade flows through your system. It flows from the front office all the way to the back office. There could be problems in the trade, right? Now, you can leverage an AI engine, and we have built something called Ops GPT, which actually monitors the trade and tells you, here is the problem, this is how you can solve the problem. It takes you into the system and helps you solve the problem and stuff like that. So you can help orchestrate the workflow better in case there is a problem. You can help make that faster, and then that is
The human is the one that's actually making the change if necessary.
it's triggering the change. It's triggering the change. So the human in the loop, you're absolutely right, Sujit. That's who is making that call, right? But really orchestrating the decision, orchestrating the change, orchestrating getting that break back to a full-fledged trade is something that the AI can do, right? And then can do it much faster than we have. Figuring out, sometimes you don't even figure that there is a break in the trade. So you process, we are processing 10 trillion worth of transactions every day. Now out of that, if there are 10 breaks in the system, how do you even get to understand that? Now Ops GPT gives me a report per leader, per application, and says, these were your breaks yesterday, go ahead and this is the system where it broke, go correct it and make it happen. So that's where this is very, very powerful, right? So that's one of the ways in which we are helping our customers become better in their day-to-day operations also, leveraging AI.
Fascinating. Anjan?
Totally agree. I think one thing that is coming as prevalent is the change governance around it. Traditional change governance methods underpinning to a business process and driving the requirements and getting an outcome, that is changing because it is all about decisions. How can you surface that decision? Now, what sort of quality gates you apply? What gate you want the AI to handle, and what gate you want the human in the loop to handle? What sort of a decisions make in that process? For example, we are in the retail world. Sort of, I'm owning the catalog. To take that example, do we want AI to change the product attributes? Because suddenly, if it hallucinates and give total control, the backbone is the catalog, right? And it's channel agnostic, therefore. So what quality gates we need to put in to validate that? What assumptions we need to make to validate that? So human in the loop becomes so much essential. So in the loop, on the loop, and off the loop is a change journey. And as organizations, I believe we need to be deliberate on those choices, where we need to make on the loop so important than off the loop. Depends upon your risk appetite, your business case, the automation that you want to sort of bring in. However, saying that, our traditional data platforms remain sacrosanct because that will drive your domain schema validations, your powerful schema around suppliers, partners, catalog, fulfillment, orders. Data lineage is so important. Data traceability is so important. So if you get the underlying platforms as strong, then you can make those conversations around what decisions we want to surface versus what decisions we want to control through that orchestration layer.
This is exactly what I had said earlier also, right? Your core platform has to be really strong. And then you control the change in your business processes to orchestrate around the fact that now you have a machine and a human working together. How do you change that is very, very critical.
Yeah, I think with any newer technology or newer systems, we'll have newer problems to solve. Um, I grew up in or India's space research organization, so I like rockets. So I'll take an example of rockets. So earlier, when we used to have the solid propellant rockets, the rockets were like designed, and the most critical part was like you need to have a very consistent flow of propellant, right? Otherwise, you can't control the rocket, right? And all. So they used to spend months and years. They used to X-ray the whole rocket, right, to see if there are tiny bubbles in your solid propellant. But if you see the latest, they are pivoting almost like 1,000 times a second, right? Like the micro corrections they are making, right? So they didn't go and solve the problem of not having problems. They said that we will solve the problem of how we handle the problems, right? So the systems right now, you can't avoid hallucinations. You are going to be dependent upon the models going forward. You will evolve the systems of how to handle the hallucinations rather than prevent hallucinations. That is not possible. You can't prevent it. Until now, we didn't have that problem because we are using deterministic systems. But if you want to go fast, if you want to build bigger rockets, you will have to accept the fact that you will have problems. The question is how responsive your systems are in terms of handling hallucinations will become important. And coming with the human in the loop thing, yes, we all want to think that, okay, putting myself in the loop, I will be able to prevent it, but you will not scale, right? So the systems which will go faster eventually, human in the loop is meant, actually I feel, in the guidance layer rather than in the somewhere in between the process, right now we need to go through in between the process because the systems are evolving, right? Like right now we need human in the loop at the different systems, but as the systems evolve, they'll become into a self-correcting mode. That is the architecture how it will evolve, like self-correcting mode of handling hallucinations. It will shift to saying that how do I test for hallucinations, how do I sort of test for the recovery systems. So it's a very different way of looking at your architecture, right? Like, so you look at the architecture, your testing strategies will be different. You are not designing for correctness, you are designing for recovery, right? The design principle goes from deterministic to resilience. As the models become commoditized, as the hallucination increase, you will be parallelly running the query across multiple models and say that which model is giving the output. You will do a consensus algorithm. You will sort of do that, which is happening with the machines right now. Non-deterministic systems actually scale faster, right? If you want to do bigger things, you will be forced to handle errors, not handle the success cases. Yeah.
Narasimhan, do you see hallucinations going away completely at all?
No, I don't think hallucinations will ever go away because its definition is also very broad, right? It depends on your context and other things. But I think it can be controlled, and how you react, the resilience aspect that Rakesh was talking about, right? That is going to be very important in terms of like how you react to such hallucinations. And then how do you constantly evolve your guardrails to ensure that it doesn't hallucinate anymore in that particular situation. But as you scale, there'll be thousands of millions of those situations, right? So as a process, which is why orchestration is so important, is how does the orchestration accommodate for it, right? So you embrace, you fail fast and you recover rather than trying to avoid every single like bit of it, right? Because there are going to be millions.
Very interesting. I think the rocket example was also very interesting, I thought. One last question to all of you. If everybody is using similar AI technologies, where is the differentiator? Sheena?
Business process.
Business process.
I sincerely believe that that's the layer that will change experiences, and that's the layer where you will build your capabilities.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the differentiation will come in.
And the human will have to think about how
The
to adapt.
human will have to design that, right? So everything that we have talked about from an architecture layer, right? Actually, before that, the data layer, right? How is your data strong? What's your lineage of the data? Is your data clean, right? How is the data flowing through the systems? Are you managing that? Then your system architecture, right? Your entire enterprise architecture that not only just consumes the data, enables flows, but also orchestrates business flows across human beings and machines, and then the entire personalization layer.
Okay. Anjan?
Totally agree. How you use the intelligence in your business context, so application layer, business process, underpinned by your core data platforms, that is going to be the differentiation.
Yeah, I think same thing, right? So end of the day, thinking about your customers, what they need the most, that has not changed, right? So businesses that cater the best to their customers become the best in that space. So I think that is what is going to be most important. That is going to be driven by ideas, and to implement ideas, you need capabilities, right? So that is the application layer, and how do you basically leverage these capabilities to give the best to your customers, right? So which is the orchestration. I think that is what will be sacrosanct for differentiation across different organizations.
Okay. In enterprises, what role is the key in this kind of thing?
See, all the points what they made are essential, right? Like those are almost the bedrock for the new age, right? Like orchestration, the data, the lineage, all of that. But we also need a mindset shift, right? The way I look at it is not about using AI, it is working with AI. If you sort of get the nuance, right? If you are using AI as a tool, you can only go so far. And you can see that, right? Like with all the latest thing and with the platforms what we built right now, one of our internal platforms what we built, like Slingshot. Right now, when I came here, my agent is working for me, right? I created a bunch of issues in my Jira, and I told the agent, just go ahead and do what you can, and when I'll go back and I'll check, and I'm very confident that 80% of them I'll just merge it and say that yes, it did a good job, right? So I'm working with them like it's like a virtual teammate to me. I'm not using it. Using it means I have to direct it. It might do faster than me, so I'm using it as a tool. That is the definition of a tool, using a tool. I think AI is beyond, it has already reached beyond a tool. It is becoming like your coworker, right? Like you need to, and the systems and the businesses, if they start using it parallelly as a full-fledged entity in their business process, I think they will be the most successful companies rather than companies which use it as a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anjan?
So one thing that I wanted to add is the organization design plays a key role here. Uh, the current organization design needs to change to adopt it. Uh, so if you are still siloed across the business processes, it may end up giving you that value. But with driving the context across, how can you use the intelligence across? Yeah, how can you do objective scenario-led decisions? To do that, we need to look at how our organization design is enabling that. Uh, from a software engineering uh, uh, part, we need to get your data, your engineers, your UX, your product sort of sitting together to sort of build that capability.
And have cross-functional agility.
Yeah, cross-functional agility, cross-boundary working. If you still see AI sitting in a corner and developing capabilities, that may not work. You know, to get it sort of as a first-class intelligence needs to be a first-class citizen.
I think the other thing that needs to change is the way we train our people and upskill our people. In the context of AI, from a software engineering perspective, it's really key now to focus on soft skills, to focus on product management, to focus on design, and to focus on domain knowledge. Right, that is going to be the key thing rather than teaching people technology skills. The way we teach our students has to change. What we are doing in a college has to change very rapidly for young graduates to fit into the new world, so to say.
Basically, lots have to change, both
Oh,
within
immense.
enterprises,
Yes,
literally
yes,
from the bottom, re-architect a lot of things. But
yes.
like you said, even for the country, we really have to do a lot in terms of reskilling our people.
Yep.
Great discussion. Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.